Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Hybrid Healing Hour. Today we're going to be talking about nutrition, and I'm super excited to have our guest with us today who flew all the way from New Jersey to be with us. Thank you so much. It's Miss Susan Greeley. Will you go ahead and please introduce yourself and your very impressive resume to everybody?
Thank you, Deanna. It is such a pleasure to be here today in person in Boca Raton, Florida. So yes, I came down from New Jersey, and I am the National Director of Wellness Services at Connolly Private Health Partners. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist of close to 30 years now, and very passionate about the work that I do in helping people in the Send Solution Wellness Program as part of Connolly. And what that is, Deanna, is a wellness program that focuses on the 4 pillars of wellness being sleep, exercise, nutrition, and stress management. So even though I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist, I don't work solely on, of course, helping people with diet and nutrition and all that. I run this wellness program and manage a team of health coaches. We work directly with physicians and provide all sorts of collaborative health to help people live happier, healthier lives. Sorry about that. Yeah. So, I can give you a little bit more about my background. I am also a cookbook author. I wrote a diet and cookbook, and very much into helping people cook better daily and reach their optimal wellness.
I can only imagine how busy you are. You're always on the go, and I love what you do with our patients and working with you guys. You pay such great attention to detail with our patients, and you're always there for them. So thank you for that. So we're so excited to dive right in. And as you mentioned, part of the 4 pillars of health, today we're going to be addressing nutrition specifically. So I've always kind of have this question, and I know I've asked other people before and I had it answered and I forgot, but please tell our audience, what is the actual difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist?
Oh, great question. So I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist, as I mentioned, and all dietitians are nutritionists, Deanna and Brian, and not all nutritionists are dietitians. And that's really the distinction to be made. So how do you become a dietitian? It's, I want to say, a grueling study, a lot of, undergraduate degree, and there's always an internship involved with that, clinical. So it's a clinical healthcare professional. And then you can go, in different directions with it. And obviously, as all medical professionals, you have to maintain your credentials. And some states have state licensure, but all dietitians are credentialed as registered dietitians. Okay, so.
And you train side by side with doctors and nurses in the hospital.
Yes, correct? Yes. Way back, as I mentioned, 30 years ago, things have changed a little bit, but I did a year-long clinical internship in Boston. So we're going way back, but that's the route to become a registered dietitian. And then there's a national exam that you have to pass, and then again, maintain those credentials over the course of years, as most medical professionals do. Yeah. So that's the difference. A nutritionist, somebody can actually take a course on nutritionists and call themselves a nutritionist. So you just want to, dive deep when you're seeking out some nutrition advice. I tell people, ask questions about their credentials and their background and their experience. That's very important.
And we've noticed also that advice varies significantly. So someone can see 2 different dietitians and have 2 different sets of advice. And it's all, personal preference and training and education. And now functional medicine has become big. So there's a lot of functional medicine-based nutritionists out there.
Mm-hmm. Dietitians also can specialize in certain areas. And that's a really great point, that this area of nutrition, I say, is often the Wild West. Now, the science is the science and always has been and will be. And then people like to take a lot and put it into their own interpretation, as we know. Food and nutrition and diet is loaded with so many different aspects of our lives, right? Emotionally and physically. Like, we all have to eat. We all function and thrive based on how we eat, quite honestly. But there's so much more to it. And dietitians do focus on therapeutic diets, and that's what we learn. Then there's the whole concept of prevention, which you know that I'm most passionate about, coming from that clinical background and seeing a lot of sickness over the years. That is a great foundation to help people really focus on prevention of chronic disease, which we're plagued by. How many millions and millions of people in this country have chronic diseases? It's the reason why people go see their doctors, go see you every single day. And I'm honored to be here talking about this because you also believe, I know, that nutrition is foundational to our health. And you take that diet first approach to helping a lot of your patients. So that's, the big change in I'd say medicine over the last couple decades too. And we're getting there. Doctors are educating themselves on nutrition more, and then functional nutrition and integrative and functional medicine, which we can talk a little bit about, but it's exciting. And even though I've been in this field for 30 years, I get more and more excited. And that's, really the most important thing. Like my passion continues and grows because we are getting into this personalized medicine approach, and it's, a lot that is evolving as we all learn and age. Absolutely.
And I mean, a lot of people come to us for advice a lot of times, and we're not taught this in med school or PA school, nurse practitioner school. Like we don't have a nutrition segment that and I have always thought about actually going to get like an adjunctive, education on this, because I love talking about it. But basically, I guess I'm that, I'm the person who thinks they know about nutrition, but it's basically, I've read so much. I'm always reading because I take my own health into my matters, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to be your own advocate. And that's what we want our patients to do as well. And it comes down to, we believe food is medicine. And if you're eating the wrong foods, you're not doing well for your body. I mean, it comes down to that. So there's so many different classes of, processed foods versus ultra processed foods versus, natural foods. So there's what is the criteria out there that people can look up and read about to see if they're eating the right kind of food?
Oh, it gets complicated. There's so much in there that you just said, Deanna, that I want to talk about. Let's really lay it out there about how Americans eat now.
Yes.
And it's pretty bleak in many ways when we hear that 70% of kids aged 2 to 19 literally every day get 70% of their calories from ultra processed foods. 70% of their daily calories, like all of our children. Adults are about 60%. So what is that? That means people aren't eating real, whole, fresh foods for most of their calories. And that has so many implications for their health, gut health, mental health, physical health, everything. So we need to do better. We need to teach people that they don't need to overcomplicate nutrition and diet. And I think that that's a key area. And I'm sure you see that as well. They come in with all these questions. They do get overwhelmed. They're bombarded by mixed messages all the time. This is good for you. This is bad for you. And it's just, then they throw their hands up and say, forget it. I'm going to eat my ultra processed, tasty snack foods, right? And because they're quick, they're convenient, and they're often cheaper. And so there's a lot that goes into making decisions about what to eat on a daily basis. But that all said, when you're out buying foods, if they come in a package, look for things that have the fewest number of ingredients, 5 or less. They say 4 or less. When you start to see added forms of sugar, and there are so many different types of sugar, there are a lot of hidden sugars, like high fructose corn syrup is the worst thing. Absolutely. Absolutely. If you see that, put it down, exactly.
Run. Like people don't realize how destroying that is.
Yes. Yeah. And we can start with that. Okay. And say, I won't eat anything that has high fructose corn syrup in it. And I wish more people would take that stance.
And how many kid foods have that? All of it. I mean, the thought of a fruit roll-up grosses me out. I wasn't even able to eat that as a child, and my parents were not even health conscious, but they just didn't buy me that crap. And I think of I see all these kids carrying that in their lunchbox every day, and it's just disgusting in my thought. I mean, they make healthy alternatives like a fruit leather that's real fruit, and it's smashed down, and it doesn't contain high fructose corn syrup. Right. I mean, if you just got to think about how you already mentioned, we've done a podcast before on gut dysbiosis. So if you haven't listened, go back and listen to that one, because we also talk about how the gut is the second brain, and it's linked with all these other conditions, So yes, I mean, it's just something so simple as cut out the high fructose corn syrup. What's another recommendation you would have for people? Another little tip that they could carry with them to the store?
I have many. So definitely focus on adding fruits and vegetables to your daily diet. And honestly, that is the biggest pitfall of the American diet of people on a daily basis. They don't eat enough of the good stuff. They lack variety. They don't get enough fiber. And we can talk more specifics, but really add the good stuff.
So going on that a little bit, I mean, I don't even know, to be honest. Is it 8 servings or what is it that you're supposed to get of fruits and vegetables?
7 to 9.
7 to 9. Even if you can't get that,
2 is better than 0.
Exactly. That is exactly. It's the baby steps that count.
Yeah.
What do you recommend for somebody who, I have a handful of patients out there who just do not eat fruits or vegetables at all. They don't like it. They don't like texture. They don't like taste or anything. So, I mean, what's your opinion on those, the powders that are out there? I give them like the reds and greens, or the fruits and veggies capsules, or the fruits and veggie powders that they can do every day to help supplement, at least get them the antioxidants. What is your input on that?
Okay.
Yay or nay?
So, I'll say yay, because, right?
I was going to say, you can be brutally honest here.
Yeah, no, I'll say yay, but you have to also be aware of what's in those powders. And it's the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to those as well. Some are very ultra processed. They have added, we'll call it fillers.
Yes.
Probably added sugars or even artificial sweeteners. And I wanted to mention that too, that I'm not a fan of artificial sweeteners for our gut health as well.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And so know what's in those protein powders, or, fruit and vegetable powders in, pill or powder form. I don't like to make people feel bad about their choices when they think they're doing something well, and they know themselves they don't have time perhaps to actually go out and buy the fruits and vegetables. They dislike them, but they're aware they need to get them into their diet. They've just met with you, like one of your patients has just met with you, and then you've told them, well, you have to get in these micronutrients and these phytonutrients and the fiber, and then they leave and say, well, how do I do that? We'll mention that's why our collaborative, the coaching and the wellness program that I do, helps them do that. It's having that ongoing support to make the best decision they can is really helpful. I'm taking it down a little different path about behaviors, and that's something that gets overlooked. Like, we can talk till we're blue in our faces about what constitutes the best diet, what can people do, but they need the help and they need the support ongoing.
And I think it's the little baby steps that people can take every day that are going to make a difference. Don't go and try to get overwhelmed with trying to focus on a diet. Like, I always work with them. I'm like,
That's
okay,
right.
let's pick the top 3, or maybe if you're willing, top 5 things we can work on over the next 2 to 4 weeks, and then come back and see me. Let's talk again. Right. So I love exactly what you said. So far, we do not like artificial sweeteners. I couldn't agree more.
No high fructose corn syrup.
No high fructose
and no
corn syrup.
Artificial sweeteners. And when I do what's called a sugar detox, that is very beneficial for pretty much everybody, you have to become aware of how all of these hidden sweeteners are in your diet, both nutritive, meaning with calories, or non-nutritive, the artificial sweeteners. So we remove those, right? And then we can focus on some other biggies, removing the refined, the ultra processed oils, the preservatives. I'm not a fan of food coloring of any kind now. So I'm a mom, I have 4 kids. And as time goes on, I'm getting a little less tolerant. I'm a little too lenient some days, but as a parent, and I'm sure a lot of people understand that kids are getting this in their diets daily. As I mentioned, the 70% of their daily calories from ultra processed foods. If you have kids who are out there making their own decisions, teach them how to look on the labels and not buy and eat foods that have these food colorings in them, all of these added preservatives, bad oils. The list goes on.
Well, we know that food coloring is also linked with like attention deficit disorder,
Exactly.
And especially if you don't have a methylation process, which we've talked about in the past. So it's very critical.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier micronutrients. Do you want to talk about the difference between macronutrients and micronutrients for those who may not know?
That's a good starting point. And just general nutrition, we do have the macronutrients that people love to talk about. They're carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. We can also throw fiber in there and water. The body runs on fuel or energy, which is what we get from our macronutrients, and macro being big. So that's the foods you eat. And most foods have some proportion of carbs, fats, and protein. Right. And it's not healthy to eliminate one group of macronutrients that fat diets tend to want to fixate on. Oh, I eat no carbs, or I'm doing an all protein diet, or I'm doing, a keto diet and that's mostly fat. So in any case, the macros do need to be balanced, but even balancing your macros every day, there's a big variety. There's no one set proportion that is appropriate for all human beings. And so that's what we have to remember. People get too rigid typically, but you do have to understand we need carbs, we need good fats. I say good carbs, good fats, and proteins every day. And then, we can talk therapeutic diet separately, but for all humans in general, and let's say the Mediterranean diet that we know is, the foundation of a longevity diet that I love to talk about and helping us all live healthier, longer, and prevent and reverse chronic disease. So let's start there. So it's balanced macros, but what does that give us? It gives us a variety of the micronutrients, which are all of our vitamins and minerals. And now there's this whole category of phytonutrients. Yes, I am a self-declared phytonutrient geek. I could talk about it all day. And that's these other compounds. They're chemical compounds that are in all of these plant foods. It doesn't have to just be fruits and vegetables. It could be your coffee or your tea. And those actually are the biggest sources of phytonutrients in our diet, right? Chocolate that most people love. It can be nuts and seeds. And so those are other plant foods that go beyond the fruits and vegetables. We all know we need to, quote unquote, eat more fruits and vegetables. But back to what you're asking me, how to get this into people's diets if they dislike fruits and vegetables. Well, let's work on getting fiber from other sources. And that could be adding more seeds to their diet. And maybe you can find like the one fruit that they like and the one vegetable that they like. And let's put it in a smoothie or a soup or some other way that is at least going to give them those phytonutrients and the micronutrients and some fiber. Most Americans are lacking fiber. And that takes me to gut health that I love to talk about.
Yes.
And we need to fuel good gut bacteria. We know for our brains, for our immune function, our overall health and well-being, so much of it is determined by our entire, we say gut microbiome, but that starts in our mouth. And who thinks about that, right? We got bugs in and on our body. Mm-hmm. Try not to get too animated here, but I get excited about this.
And many people don't think of the mouth as part of the GI tract, but it is.
Right.
And many people don't think of using mouthwash as being a bad thing, but we now know that it is, right? It
is.
Antimicrobial mouthwash.
That's right. Those aseptic mouthwashes kill the good bugs. It kills the good bacteria that naturally exist in our mouths. And digestion does begin in the mouth. That's a really important point to make. I love that. And so back to throwing artificial sweeteners under the bus. Think about people who may be drinking diet sodas throughout the day. They're constantly washing their mouth, right, with those artificial sweeteners. Maybe they started their day by rinsing their mouth with the mouthwash as well. You're killing the good bacteria in your mouth. So stop doing that. And, when it comes to making habits, if you are a soda drinker, diet, regular, all of that, and you really love it, you don't have to go cold turkey. I talk behavior change with people all the time. So do the best that you can and maybe decrease it first, and then with the goal of replacing it with something else.
Exactly. I always say tapering it off. I mean, we taper off medications, just taper off your soda.
Taper off the soda. Exactly. So that starts with the mouth, and then, but back to the whole GI tract and the gut microbiome. We have to think about that throughout. So I like to tell people to start their day whenever you first eat in the day to get a combination of fiber and protein. So I say fiber specifically because if you're eating some form of whole fresh food, such as, let's say you make a whole grain avocado toast with an egg on top. That's a nice example of good fat, fiber, and protein. And that fuels good gut bacteria. You don't want to start your day, at least, what I like to tell people is don't start with a load of bad fats, artificial sweeteners, or sugar. And that happens for a lot of people in their beverage in the morning. If you have coffee with a creamer and an artificial sweetener, that's not fueling good bacteria.
Right. And
it's hard to hear. It's hard for people to hear.
Absolutely.
Actually.
I mean, people don't realize we tell people to aim for about like 40 grams of protein a day. I'd say a minimum of 30. And I guarantee majority of people, unless you're tracking your macros and what you eat and put in your body, you're probably not getting probably
anywhere
about
near
10.
That. Right.
I mean, I think the average person gets about 10 grams.
Right.
But like you said, avocado, I just learned avocado actually is high in fiber.
Very high in fiber.
And I did not know that because I always thought of fiber as like fibrous, like the cruciferous vegetables, right? Like your broccoli, your cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. And I eat, that's my rule of thumb personally is have a green with every meal. And so I switch that green up and it typically make sure I get a little bit of fiber in every meal then. Okay. And, but it's just shocking to me that people don't do that.
No. I like the green with every meal, Deanna. I have to comment on several of those things. And yeah, the fiber and protein is easy to get, if you become aware of how much protein is in certain things and the fiber in those foods. I love that you say you didn't know that avocados are high in fiber, but you're learning this and it's eye-opening to people when they see, if you need to Google a list of high fiber foods, do it. And then intentionally add those to your diet. I wanted to say that getting maybe 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal, I believe is, the goal. What you were saying, you were encouraging people, I think, closer to 40.
That was fiber. Oh, I was saying fiber in a day.
Fiber in a day.
So
okay,
40 grams of fiber per day, and I don't think a lot of people even come close to that
because the average is 15.
Right, but I am a fan of the protein. Yes, I agree with you about 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal. Yes, and it depends. I think on your what are you trying to get out of it. Like if you're trying to bulk up and have muscle production, I aim higher. Like there's many different calculations on how much protein you should have per day. Right,
an individual.
Exactly. So that one I do individualize. But for fiber, I mean, like you said, going back to the gut, fiber helps your bowels be regular. We know that you have to poop in order to detox your body and get rid of the toxins. And fiber is it's considered a prebiotic, I believe, but I could be wrong about that.
Well, there's prebiotic fiber, and that is the type of fiber that fuels good bacteria. So the bacteria are live bugs in our GI tract, and they need to eat. Right?
Yes.
That's what prebiotic fiber is. Foods like oats and bananas, they're higher in the soluble fiber. So they're soluble and insoluble.
Right.
And not that everybody needs to become an expert on the types of fiber as well. But if you think about it, so the insoluble fiber that we don't digest breaks through and actually helps fuel good bacteria in particular. But that is the supportive structure of most plants. So that's what you're thinking about.
Right.
And I love the term cruciferous vegetables. People laugh at me when I say that, but that's what we need. That's your broccoli, your cauliflower, your Brussels sprouts, asparagus, even things like cabbage, kale, and you're striving for the green with every meal. Don't forget though that of course we say eat the rainbow, and there's a reason that that's such a simple message to eat a rainbow of foods.
I say that to get the micronutrients,
yes,
right? Like to get your vitamins and the phytonutrients, exactly. Mm-hmm. So I always when I create a salad, I actually literally just did this the other day, and I make this vegetable salad with just all raw vegetables. Excellent. But I pick if I'm going to have tomatoes, which are red, then I get a yellow pepper, and then I have carrots that are orange, and then I get, so I switch it up a lot just to get all the colors of the rainbow.
And you should also try to eat what's in season, right?
Yes.
That's typically going to be the season's fruits and vegetables grow for a reason.
Right.
And they change for a reason. So a lot of people don't. A lot of people get their fruits and vegetables, frozen, and which is okay. There's still nutrients in frozen vegetables.
There are. That's a good point to make. So I teach people and tell them, do get the frozen. Keep a variety of frozen fruits and vegetables on hand for that reason, that your fresh local vegetables, aren't always the best, and depending on where you live, of course. So it's easier to get more variety when you do rely on some amount of the frozen food. So don't feel bad about that.
How
I do
feel
get that
about-
question still
How
a
do you feel
lot.
about canned fruits and vegetables?
That's a different story. Most canned I'm not a fan of because they're then also preserved with extra, like a lot of added sodium. That's
Well, if they sit on a shelf, they obviously
on-
have something in them to keep them healthy for shelf life.
yes, exactly.
I mean-
there are certain ones, but in general, go for fresh or frozen over canned any day.
And going back to fiber for a minute, many people don't realize that fiber has hormonal effects. Fiber binds carcinogens. Fiber does a lot.
Fiber does do a lot. And if you know that you are at risk for something like breast cancer, I'm just using that as one example, it is really important to get a very high fiber diet. So above the 25 grams of fiber a day for women. And I say that slightly less for women than men, but in general, focusing on the fiber because that does help with our detoxification processes in the body. That's an extremely important point.
And then let's talk about some myths out there. Soy.
Okay. I love these myths.
Yeah. A lot of people recently have come up with the idea that soy is bad for you and soy is carcinogenic. And that couldn't be further from the truth, right?
That is definitely far from the truth. That's what I call the fear factor. And it's really a shame because people then eliminate what's an otherwise very healthy food from their diet. And I say this, if I created my own top 10 list of healthiest foods, I would include whole soy foods on it, quite honestly, because soy foods are protective against certain cancers, not just breast cancer. And that's what most people don't understand or don't know. So they have these natural phytoestrogens in them. And that's the confusion, that there was this leap that was made, or, not understanding that the quote unquote phytoestrogens in these soy foods fuel estrogen receptor positive breast cancers. That was one area of thought. The studies all show that not only do they not fuel the breast cancers, they're actually protective against recurrence. They're protective against breast cancer if you've never had breast cancer. And if you have had breast cancer, this is actually very important, it's protective against recurrence.
Wow.
So any woman who has had breast cancer, I actually look at the overall quality of the diet, and I would much rather they eliminate all ultra processed foods and then, and non-organics, and focus on whole fresh foods that does include things like edamame.
Exactly.
And there's still some medical professionals out there who believe that soy is bad.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a shame, but that's why we're talking about this. And thank you for bringing that up. That is definitely an area where don't eat with fear and find out the truth. As I said, the science is the science, and we have that to help educate people.
Right. And you always have to take a look at the study and how it was done. I mean, if you think about, as we've already mentioned, 60% of adults out there are eating ultra-processed foods.
Daily.
That is going to cause cancer.
Yes.
More than edamame.
Exactly.
Or even,
Thank you, Deanna.
even tofu or tempeh, right? Like,
that's what I tell
those
people.
are
That's
more
exactly
natural,
it.
plant-based. Like, hello, you're eliminating something that's healthy because
Do I
of a
love
fear,
you?
but yet you go to McDonald's. Okay, that
Right.
makes sense, right?
Right.
So,
justifying the bad, and also consuming, you and I can talk about this a lot, the toxins that come from the packaging.
oh, absolutely. Well, and that actually, I was going to say something about that with even canned goods. You're getting aluminum. And what do we link aluminum with? Breast cancer. Yes. Why do we do aluminum-free deodorant and try to not wear wire in our bras, to prevent breast cancer? So these are things like, but yet you go eat canned goods.
And even packaged foods every single day.
Absolutely. Anything that's labeled. It's
foods and beverages.
Absolutely. Yes.
It's pervasive.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us, what would be your 5 go-to foods? If you had to pick 5 foods that you would...
Oh, I was going to say that's tough. 5? Only 5?
I know.
Okay.
5 is too hard. And I'll tell you why 5 is too hard, but I'll do general categories because I preach getting more variety, as you know. But that's okay. If we took just 5 foods, I'm putting beverages in there as well. And I think you all know that I do love my coffee. Amen.
Me too.
Yeah.
And can you actually, I'm going to go off topic a little bit. We're going to come back to those 5 foods, but tell us about coffee. You actually have your own podcast, which we're going to talk about at the very end of this. I want people to listen in as well. But you interviewed Purity Coffee, and you strictly use them. Can you just maybe talk about coffee and why that matters?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, we'll start there. So in my top 5 foods and beverages to consume, coffee is a part of millions and millions of people's daily lives. So let's make it the healthiest that we can. And I did mention already, coffee and tea actually are the biggest source of phytonutrients in our diets globally, which is fantastic, right? In the US, I say coffee specifically because we're bigger coffee drinkers than tea drinkers.
Right. Over in London, might be more tea.
Yeah. I'm a both. Okay. I'm a both drinker. I love teas. I love coffees, but let's say you do start your day with coffee. I had interviewed the CEO of Purity Coffee that you just mentioned. And the reason why I drink that brand specifically is because they test for mold and other toxins. And it's purely organic and, like I said, mold-free, pesticide-free. And that's really important. You and I just mentioned organics, and, that's personal choice in many situations, but I am a big proponent of finding the highest quality foods that you can and eating less of them if you think they're expensive, but prioritizing that for your own health. We all should know about our genes. We could talk about that separately, our own genetics and epigenetics and diet. But that said, why not strive for the healthiest foods and beverages you put in your body? And that's what I go for. That's my goal in my daily coffee. And I grind my beans every day and I absolutely love them. And I start my day feeling even that is actually coffee is good for good gut health.
Absolutely. And people don't realize a lot of coffee out there is moldy because they have to heat it.
And they're mold sensitive.
Right. And I think it's even the process of heating it and then packaging it to seal it, and that moisture gets trapped. And a lot of people don't realize that. So you can actually find out. There's a lot of different companies out there. Purity is just one that we do trust and have tried. And I also use Fabula coffee, and they're mold tested as well and organic. But there's a lot of other companies out there, and they should be willing to share their test results with you as well. But what's number 2 for you then?
Okay, so we got our beverages. And I did want to mention to listeners, do your own taste test with your coffees and teas when you have those organic and mold-free and all of that. And by the way, I wanted to mention that too, why I do it. I'm a black coffee drinker. I've thrown all of those sweeteners and sugars under the bus. Don't load your coffee with the bad stuff.
Exactly.
And that's important for your gut health again. So people will say, oh, it's too bitter. I don't like the taste. Well, you don't like the taste because you're drinking bad and probably moldy coffee.
That's exactly. I love that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So get a cleaner coffee and do your own taste test.
And I will say too, real quick on that, I notice if I go to like a hole in the wall, maybe, or if I start to feel jittery, because I drink a ton of coffee every day.
Yeah.
And when I feel jittery from coffee, I know it was not good coffee.
That's right.
And people don't realize that. Yeah.
Well, that's a very big sign. I completely agree with you and experience that myself because I'm not always able to drink my organic mold-free coffee at home.
If you travel a lot too, or if you were on the go. Right.
Yeah. And that's something we could talk about too. There's no perfection with diet, and that's really important. So, strive for the best in your what I call your base diet or your daily diet, and do the best you can, prioritizing adding, these top 5. Okay. So we got through number 1. We started with our coffee. Number 2, I really encourage people to eat. I like seeds more so than nuts. So we'll say nuts and seeds, but seeds are a great source of our anti-inflammatory fats. Okay. When we're talking about phytonutrients as well. We came out of that pandemic changed, didn't we?
Oh yeah.
And certain micronutrients were highlighted during the pandemic, and that's a good thing. So zinc is one of them that we all learned. Well, we already knew, but a lot of people will be taking zinc. If you want to get zinc in your diet, nuts and seeds are a great source. That's another reason. But most Americans are lacking the good anti-inflammatory fats. And by that, I do mean our omega-3s. And seeds are a good source of one of the omega-3s. It's an essential fatty acid. We hear a lot about fish oil. I could spend an entire podcast talking about fats alone. They're actually a lot more complicated than what we make them out to be. So suffice it to say, we do need good plant sources of fats because there are plenty of vegans, and on these a lot of people are now plant-based and all that, and they're not consuming fish, obviously. So plants are great sources of good fats, and we need those for our brain and for our immune function. Every cell in our body requires good, healthy fat sources. I'm a big fan. I have this tagline that I've been saying for many, many years, Deanna. It's in my book. We need to focus on getting good fats, fiber, and phytonutrients. So that's why my number 2 was seeds. And then I can add some nuts in there. Number 3, I will, of course, then focus on the fiber as my favorite source. So it's important to get these cruciferous. I hesitated saying it because, people are like, what are cruciferous vegetables? Again, phytonutrient. Yeah. So those are those non-starchy vegetables. You said you strive to put something green in. I think most of us, even if you just have the short list of the broccoli, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, cabbage, those are important to include, if not daily, then multiple times a week. Okay, so the non-starchy cruciferous vegetables, like I said, and those have the fiber in them as well, and some other compounds in them that are very protective against all forms of cancer. Yes. We were talking about those detox processes as well. So number 4, we need some good sources of protein, and honestly, I am a big fan of eggs and other non-plant proteins because you get a higher quality protein and you also get different micronutrients, when you consume animal versus plant proteins. And so high quality protein is really important. I said eggs because it's like nature's almost perfect food, I call them. And there's been, through the years, out of any food, you mentioned soy, back to our myths and fear, those things are real for people still. And so many people ask me when I meet with somebody to lower their cholesterol, Susan, can I eat eggs? And I go through a lot of their different tests and lab results when you have them and explain it without family history. There are very, very few people who honestly benefit from eliminating eggs.
Couldn't agree more.
That being said, though, we do tell people that egg whites, you can eat them unlimited, but there should be a limit to how many egg yolks you consume. Right.
When working with somebody, I agree. A general statement is you can eat eggs daily. Please don't overdo,
maybe you don't need 6 eggs.
Exactly.
Right?
That's the thing. There's a limit
There's
to the
moderation.
Yeah.
But in your weekly repertoire of good, healthy proteins, I do include eggs. It can be other animal proteins as well. If you do, a lot of people do dairy, then yogurt would be my go-to for dairy, yogurt and kefir. I could talk about the proteins for a while. I don't know, but
and I think you said it's quality, right?
It is quality,
not quantity. So I specifically get grass-fed beef. I'm not anti-beef. In fact, I actually did cut out meat in my diet, went plant-based for 3 months, and nothing changed on my cholesterol panel. So I am one that I was like, well, I'm not doing this anymore.
Right.
I'm going to go back and eat what I want because nothing has changed,
I'm with you.
And I eat eggs and meat, and I just try to get good quality. I get, cage-free, free-range chicken, eggs.
Exactly.
Grass-fed beef.
Grass-fed beef. We all do. I think we're all on, the same page with that. And I myself do eat everything. And I will say that because I practice what I preach. That's important to me. And not only that, I enjoy a wide variety of food in that so-called flexitarian diet, and the longest living people on the earth, those blue zone populations, they don't fully eliminate meats as well. Only one of those groups, but that's a side story. So protein, getting adequate protein. And then finally, I am very big on leafy greens every day. People are surprised by that. I think it's extremely important to get your variety, but dark leafy greens every single day. And you need those with a good fat. So let's say you do some sort of cooked or raw leafy greens every day. That's one thing I prioritize. I didn't even get to fruits on that list.
Right.
But
well, that's only 5 now. That's all we're doing.
I know, exactly. We said 5, so that's it. And then overall, the overarching, bubble we'll say to all of those is variety still key, and do focus on getting more of the good stuff, fruits and vegetables and all those other plant foods. So even if you do eat meat and, whatever you want to label your diet as really isn't my main focus when working with people. It's what do you do? What are those daily habits and how do you optimize your diet on a daily basis? Not when you're on vacation, not when you have this. And we all have days that aren't typical, of course, but again, focus on that base daily diet and make it the best that you can.
And I think it's easier to do when you do some form of meal prepping.
Absolutely.
And knowing and planning. So if I don't know what I'm going to be eating that day, and then what do you know? Time goes by. I have 5 minutes to pick something to eat. I'm just going to go somewhere quick, right? But if you have a plan and in your head already, it's just easier to go through with it.
Oh, absolutely.
It's true. You don't wait till you're hungry before you decide what you're going to eat.
Exactly. And never go to the grocery store hungry. That is my rule of thumb because I will go
hungry. We all do that.
Yes.
I also have to add that you can have the perfect plan in place, but at the end of the day, when you come home, I literally mean at the end of your workday, you come home and you had your plan, but you hadn't actually bought the foods.
Right.
So I learned this actually from one of my clients probably 20 years ago about the 3 Ps. So to plan, purchase, and prepare. So you plan first, of course, but you have to purchase the foods and then prepare them.
Okay.
And I'm all about ease. My cookbook, everything I do, I love quick, easy, delicious meals because no matter what, we all eat first based on taste.
Now, I just have one last question before we wrap this up.
Okay.
And how do you explain, so your opinion, I guess, of the clean 15, dirty dozen, right? Could you maybe touch on that and what that means? I've seen it on social media a lot lately.
Oh, okay. That has been a very helpful list that has been around for, I'm guessing, at least 15 years, maybe longer. Came out from what's called the Environmental Working Group, and I'm a big fan of using that as a tool to teach people how to prioritize where to spend their food dollars on organic versus non-organic. And the whole point of that list is to actually help people discern, is it worth the, buying organic or not? If I want to remove those pesticides from my food and diet, help me, right? Do I need to buy organic avocados and bananas? Not necessarily they're on the clean list. They have the thicker, tougher skins, but there's always this list. It comes out, doesn't change much, to be honest, from year to year. The same foods that are on it all the time are a lot of the fruits. Fruits are more susceptible to, pests, and we want our peaches and our apples to look good, and so they're heavily sprayed. So that list gives us the dirty dozen are the ones that are most heavily sprayed by pesticides, and you might, or I hate to use the word should, buy organic or prioritize. I tell people whatever you eat regularly, such as apples and leafy greens. And so that's something I do. I buy apples pretty much year round, organic apples, because I give them to my kids too. And they're an easy, portable fruit. I don't do the fruit roll-ups, as you can imagine. I give them a fruit. So I do want to make sure that they are organic. And same with leafy greens and some other fruits. Berries, I know they're expensive. That's where the frozen comes in. So the foods that end up being on the dirty dozen, if you can find, a frozen alternative, or not alternative, sorry, a frozen version, then that's more cost effective because cost comes into play for people too.
Right.
But back to the clean list, you don't necessarily need to spend the money on buying them organic. And honestly, broccoli tends to always be on the clean list. And
that's interesting.
It is, isn't it? So if that makes you feel better, but I really go by that list myself, and I think I've shared it with a lot of your patients, through
we have some of the cards in our office.
Thank you. Yes. Good. Yes.
We carry
it's helpful to people. It's a great resource.
Well, because I always actually had the rule of thumb of the thicker the peel, then you can just get away with the non-organic. But there are some thick peels on the dirty dozen one.
Potatoes.
Yeah.
I love potatoes.
Okay.
I'm a big potato, not just fan. They're a great vegetable. I shouldn't say, I almost said obviously, but maybe we don't know it's obvious that is the most consumed vegetable in the United States is potatoes. I say obviously because potato...
it comes in many different forms.
I was going to say, unfortunately, the ultra-processed food form. But potatoes are really a great way to get a vegetable in your diet, honestly. People shy away from them because of the carbohydrate. And, between the soy and the potatoes... alone.
Well, that actually is going to bring up another topic before we wrap up. I just like to say, too, if you're going to be eating carbohydrates, which I do, I just tend to eat the carbs that grow in the ground.
Yes.
You know, the whole carbs, not the breads and the pastas that are man-made.
Exactly.
And if you are going to eat those, try to eat a big old salad beforehand, you know.
Yes, or with it.
Or with it, exactly. So I think that's just something you can have it. You don't have to eliminate it, but just smaller portions. We all get a huge bowl of pasta and we don't eat it. And what do you eat with pasta? Bread. You typically eat rolls with it, right?
That.
So I don't, but you know, I see it all the time, and I'm like,
we do see it all the time. I live in New Jersey, Deanna. I see it all the time. I do say one thing. I know I keep talking, trying to close it up. Back to the potatoes and the apples, I encourage people to eat the skin. That's why buy them organic and do eat that skin. You're getting very, very valuable.
Well, that's where the nutrients are.
Exactly. And those phytonutrients. Quercetin is one. And, you know, if you've heard of that term, that's in the skin of the apples. That's also very protective against, helps people ward off allergies.
Absolutely. It's in my, I take a senolytic. So it is known as a senolytic. So it gets rid of the zombie cells in your body. It can ward off illnesses and cancer, aging. Exactly. So huge fan. So eat the whole thing, not the core, but exactly, including the skin. Fabulous. Well, this was amazing. I loved every bit of it, and I feel like we could continue talking for hours more, and so we'll just have to have you back.
I would love to come back.
Awesome. Yes. So tell our audience how they can, 1, get your book, 2, listen to your podcast, and how else can they follow you?
Happily tell them that my book is called Lighten Up. It's a Cooking with Trader Joe's cookbook. It has been around 12 years. It is still very relevant. I talk all about the good fats, fiber, phytonutrients, and even a call it good carb diet and way for weight loss specifically. It is focused on weight loss. So that's Lighten Up by Susan Greeley. And my podcast, I love my podcast to share it with people. It's called A Sense of Wellness. And that is on all platforms as well. And that is through Castle Connolly Private Health Partners, where I didn't mention that I'm Senior Vice President. I think I said I'm the National Director of Wellness Services. So that's A Sense of Wellness podcast. And finally, I do have my own website. It's my name, susangreeley.com.
And that's Greely.
Ley.
That's okay.
You got it. Susan Greeley, Greely.com. And thank you so much for having me. I love to talk about this.
Thank you for coming on the show.
Okay. I'll come back anytime.
The information contained in this podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended for the purposes of diagnosing, curing, treating, or preventing any disease. This podcast is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. Before using any products or services referenced on this podcast, consult with your healthcare provider, carefully read all labels, and heed all directions and cautions that accompany the products. Information found or received through the podcast should not be used in place of a consultation or advice from a healthcare provider. If you suspect you have a medical problem or should you have any healthcare questions, please promptly call or see your healthcare provider. This podcast, including Dr. Brian Marias, Deanna Weilbacher, and Hybrid Medical Solution, do not claim responsibility for any adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for any statements made by the guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referenced.
If you would like to submit any questions or if you have any topics you would be interested in hearing about on future episodes, please contact us through our website, www.hybridmedicalsolution.com. That is solution with no S at the end. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, all under Hybrid Medical Solution.